Okay, let's get started. Hello, everyone. My name is Uswa Ahmed, and I'm the National Coordinator Pakistan of IVCoM and ICOM Pakistan. I welcome you all to the second session of the virtual conference towards change and innovation, museums, sustainability, and well-being. I'd like to add that yesterday's session went absolutely successful, and we received praises and positive feedback from our international colleagues and other museum professionals. I am honored to moderate our discussion today and facilitate the exchange of ideas among esteemed experts and participants from around the world. In our panel today, I welcome Dr. Shirley-Ann Behravesh, Assistant Professor of Global Sustainable Enterprise, Senior Global Future Scientist, Ms. Sarah Sutton, Co-founder and CEO of Environment and Culture Partners, and Mr. Majed Jakka Mansoori, Deputy Executive Director of Museum of the Future. Thank you for being here with us today. I guarantee all of you, our audience members, that by the end of this session, we'll be inspired, enlightened, and equipped with a fresh perspective on the remarkable potential of museums as agents of change. So the virtual conference coincides with the International Museum Day theme for the year 2023, which is Museums, Sustainability, and Wellbeing, in an effort to revive IVCoM, a project that was jointly launched by international museum professionals with special efforts by ICOM Pakistan during the COVID-19 pandemic. ICOM Pakistan has been leading discussions at the core of museums and cultural organizations on topics such as preventive conservation of collections, prevention of illicit trade of cultural objects, museum education, among many other varied areas of study. Currently, there's a revival of museums as new museums in Pakistan, as new museums are being developed and existing ones are being revitalized. This is paving the way to engage diverse audiences and foster sustainable practices. Through this conference, ICOM Pakistan intends to explore the exciting possibilities that lie ahead and collaborate with experts and thought leaders across the world and cultivate innovative approaches to this important topic. So without much delay, I am honored to introduce you all to our very first guest speaker, my dearest professor at the Arizona State University, Dr. Shirley-Ann Behravesh, who is an assistant professor in Global Sustainable Enterprise with the Thunderbird School of Global Management. Dr. Behravesh is also a senior global future scientist with the Global Institute of Sustainability and Innovation. She holds degrees in management, finance, manufacturing, engineering, and sustainability. Her research focuses on strategies to encourage adoption of sustainability and innovation practices within organizations and communities. Having grown up on a small island in the Caribbean, Dr. Behravesh is particularly interested in building resilient communities through grassroots innovations in small island states and the developing world. She teaches courses in innovation, entrepreneurship, and sustainability. Dr. Behravesh works with and advises organizations in the field of sustainability and sits on the Climate Action Advisory Council for the city of Tucson. So, Dr. Behravesh, the mic is yours.
Thank you so much. It's a great pleasure to be here. And I will admit that museums have not been a focus of my research, but from a broader enterprise level, the moment that I got asked to be part of this panel, it just came into mind that museums are such an important part of the conversation, and there are several roles for institutions such as museums and other similar types of enterprises that sort of act as a bridge between academia and the public, right? And we struggle with that these days, where academia is sort of remain siloed. We do this great research and we come up with some really great solutions and ideas and understandings of situations, but it just doesn't get passed on. So this is such a great important role, and I think that museums are, the space, the institution that can really break ground in creating that bridge. So I'm really glad to be here. I want to set the stage for a really great conversation. We have two great guest speakers here who actively work in this space. So from a really broad level, I think of museums as having different sort of roles in when we think about sustainability, we think about well-being in general, and we could think about it from a more internal perspective. So as a typical organization or enterprise would, we think about our internal operations, how can we reduce water, energy. A lot of museums are thinking about this, right? And we have an example here. We'll hear about the Museum of Tomorrow in Dubai, and where we've seen museums start to recognize that they need to be at the forefront of thinking about how we generate energy, how we conserve water, how we think about the natural environment around us, and integrate that within our own operations to benefit from cost savings, but also at the same time engage with the community and broaden that awareness. So I think from the internal operations, it's very similar to most organizations out there where you think about reducing the reliance on non-renewable resources. And a lot of museums out there have the LEED certification and are doing some really cutting edge innovations when it comes to those sorts of activities. But then where I'm really, really interested is the education part, right? So museums have this really particular role where it's not just a case where you're presenting the past, humanity's past, and that's how we tend to think about museums, right? It's a place to showcase our ancestors, to think about how we did things in the past, and it's a way to educate the present on the past. And that is one really, really instrumental role for an organization such as museums, where we can start to present scenarios that are based on past actions. So, I've been to several museums where we see the decline in biodiversity over time, where you see those species that have gone extinct. And I have two young kids. I have an 8-year-old. In fact, both of them are, there's an 8-year-old, the 11-year-old, and they're both love animals. So whenever we go to a museum and they see those animals that have either gone extinct or endangered, they ask, but why aren't we taking care of those species? Why are they dying? And then we go through this whole conversation of, well, we're changing the environment, we're changing their habitats, we're impacting the climate, which then affects their livelihoods. And all of these come out through conversations. I just visited a museum. Right? And this is where that magic happens, right? Just by showcasing something small as, this animal used to be alive, or this animal, there are only this many of them left in the world, on the planet. We start to have these conversations about, why is this happening? And how can we change it, right? So museums have this really, really pivotal role where they can start to spark those conversations and ideas, even in the youngest of minds, right? I think museums also have a really great role with community engagement. All right, so we know that there's a lot of activities and programs out there that engage with schools, that engage with underserved communities, that engage with indigenous communities as well. These are ways in which we reach out to these audiences and help craft that awareness, that mindset change, right? So continuing to reach out to audiences, that might not be aware or might not think of museums as a place that is accepting of them in some cases. I've met a lot of people who've never been to a museum. I'm actually from an island where we don't have museums. It's so tiny that we don't have our own natural museums, and we national museums, sorry. There are some spaces where people have tried to sort of bring together some artifacts or some historical elements, and start that education. But if you don't grow up with that, it's not something that you look to. And so when I first moved to England, which is the first country that I moved to out of St. Lucia, you know one of my first places to visit were museums, because I had read and seen so much about them, and I was very actively interested in historical elements, and I wanted to see those artifacts that I've heard so much about. But a lot of my countrymen would not be the same, and so they'd sort of feel divorced from this idea of going to a museum, because it's just not part of a culture. So having museums reach out to those communities, to those groups of people who would otherwise not think about themselves as part of the museum culture, as a museum goer, I think that is a really, really great way to build that audience, to build that awareness as well. And this has become something, I think, over the last few years. One of the good things that's come out of COVID, right? This conference, even ways to reach people other than having to pay an entrance fee or having to travel across the world to go to these great art galleries or these great national history museums that otherwise would be inaccessible to some. So we've started to see museums allow their artifacts, their collections to be shown online. So all of a sudden, you've opened up the world to people who otherwise wouldn't have made it. The museums, the Guggenheim Museum and MoMA, and all of these really amazing museums that a lot of people would not have access to, actually let their collections be available online. And so that was, I think, and that has been the start of that, building that awareness and bringing more people into the space. The final sort of role I see museums have is, I mentioned that we tend to think of them as associated with the past, a showcase of our past actions and present as well. But museums have come to be known for their future thinking as well. So I'm sure you'll hear a lot about it. We have someone from the Museum of Tomorrow, which implies that sort of future thinking. But we see museums as not just thinking of historical elements, but thinking about the future. So building those scenarios, and I've been to many museums that sort of build the scenarios of climate change. If we continue on this path, what does the next 50 years look like? What does the next 100 years look like? What does that mean for people and communities and cities in particular, right? And not just in this, but in elements of societal challenges as well, where you see art exhibitions that talk about past injustices. So we can think about in North America, we have the Native Americans as well, and there's a lot of Native American museums around the U.S. now, and you only need to step into the doors to really understand how much we have impacted such a community, right? There's museums that are devoted to slavery and African Americans and others around the world, and so we've only now started to think about showcasing elements where it might be painful, but it's a past pain that helps us build better futures. And you know, if we hide them and we don't bring them to the forefront, then we are doomed to make the same mistakes. So I think museums have this really unique role to sort of, you know, be the educators, to be the ones that can reach to communities that perhaps would be closed off to this sort of educational and awareness building outputs, to engage with communities, to think about ways to build activists, not activists in the sense as, you know, as we would think about it, but people who are solutioners, people who think about actions and getting stuff done rather than just talking about the issues. So children engaging with more and more K to 12 education and making sure that we understand those issues, but not just are aware of the issues, but we are aware of some ways to actually impact and create change, right? So we have a long history of doom and gloom, and and we've done enough of the everything's everything's changing and everything's going the wrong way, and everyone now, I think, from any corner of the world can tell you, okay, there's something off with our climate at this point. So it's really a case of, okay, but what now? How we move forward? And I think museums, with their sort of quasi a role in this space, can help do that, right? Build that awareness, educate, reach the communities, but also be the solutionaires, or encourage those solutionaires and those innovations to move forward and create that change. So you know, it's having that multifactorial role in this wider sustainability, that's the sustainability challenges that we experience today. I think museums are such an important part of this conversation. So I'm excited to hear what our other panelists have to say, because I know that you guys are really been getting your hands dirty and creating a change in this space.
Thank you, Dr. Behravesh, for your expertise and for bringing in such a unique perspective to this topic today. You know, some points you mentioned about sparking ideas in young minds, and that's really important at the moment. I think it's always been, but especially at this moment now, with so many things going on in the world at the moment related to environmental impact and sustainability, and you know, fostering that museum going culture. I feel that that's really lacking in most parts of the world. Museums just seem to be these static institutions, and they're just there as historical places where you can see these, find and explore historical objects, but really creating that space where museums can, you know, think forward and move towards the future and kind of inspire people and create that museum going culture. So thank you for that. Now I would like to introduce our next distinguished speaker and thought leader, Ms. Sarah Sutton, who is the co-founder and CEO of Environmental Culture Partners, ECP, a US-based nonprofit accelerating environment leadership of the cultural sector. ECP is a partner on a variety of projects, including the, if I say this right, Franken-Haller Climate Initiative, a grant program supporting $10 million of energy efficiency and clean energy projects in visual arts museums, Culture Over Carbon, an Institute of Museum and Library Services National Leadership Grant, researching energy use in museums, and Caretakers of Wonder, also national grant, addressing the work of children's museums in climate change mitigation and developing a learning framework for early childhood climate engagement. ECP is a cultural sector leader for America is All In, a multi-sector coalition of 5,000 plus US organizations supporting the Paris Agreement. Ms. Sutton, I'd also like to mention, is the author of The Green Museum, author of Environmental Sustainability at Historic Sites and Museums, and most recently, author of The Role of the Arts and Humanities in Documenting Climate Change, Broadening Public Engagement. She was a member of the American Psychological Association's Climate Change Task Force and one of the 100 global representatives invited to advise the International Panel on Climate Change, which is known as the IPCC, the International Council of Monuments and Sites, and the United Nations Education, Science, and Cultural Committee, and on the role of cultural heritage in IPCC assessments. So, Ms. Sarah Sutton, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Uswa. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending upon where you are. I want to congratulate you, Uswa, on the design of this gathering today. The flow is perfect, from the professor's broader approach to my looking at the cultural sector, and then our final speaker thinking about at a specific institution. I think they're very complementary, and I appreciate that design. So the aspect of this work that I'll be talking about, there we go, is how museums support well-being around climate and the mental health aspects of knowing that the climate is changing and that we've had some role in creating that. So climate grief and climate despair are actual mental health conditions that are documented and diagnosable. And they're a result of when people know that the climate is changing, how it will affect them and the things that they value, and that humans have had a role in that. And sometimes it's the humans who are affected by it, and sometimes it's people who aren't affected by the disadvantages, but continue to perpetuate the damage. Now, museums, as socially conscious organizations responsible for contributing to the well-being of their communities, have a responsibility to help the communities deal with the issues that affect them most. And climate change increasingly is one of those. And just as the professor said about the magic that happens in museums, we're beginning to understand more about the social science of the museum experience, and that we are educators and we do engage people, but that magic is where people come to a museum and they discover more about themselves and the world around them. That's the magic. It's a little hard for us to predict what everyone will discover and how they will put the pieces together. But we know that when they do that, it builds their own capacity for their own well-being and the well-being of others around them now and in the future. That's the sweet spot for our help with climate worries and creating climate hope. Now, why do I think museums ought to do this? We have a lot of them in the United States. If you put two of our largest fast food chains together, Starbucks and McDonald's, there wouldn't be as many of those restaurants as there would be historic sites, zoos, museums, and aquariums in the United States. And a whole lot of people go to those museums, more of them than go to sporting events, to professional sporting events. That doesn't count kids' soccer on Saturday mornings, but professional sporting events, more people go to museums than to sporting events. And they trust those museums to tell them things they need to learn, including about climate. Most of our visitors, based on research by the American Alliance of Museums, think that museums should talk about climate change and do something about it. So if we're talking about climate change, doing something about it, and people are out in the environment experiencing climate change, they will feel afraid. They will feel that they are going to lose beauty. They're going to lose healthy ecosystems. They're going to lose places of joy and peace that are important to them. And that knowledge impacts their well-being. We can't fix all of that, and we shouldn't try to, but there are aspects we can address. And the three I organize as identity, agency, and hope. So I've broken the talk into an awful lot of words, for which I apologize, about all three things. Now, for you to manage your expectations of the length of the presentation, there's more information about identity than there is about agency, and then a little bit about hope. So if you're calculating how long is she going to be talking and you see how long identity is, the others are shorter. But for each of these three categories, I've provided a social science summary because the quotes are too long, the research is too much, which is a good thing. It means that we have lots of information of how to deal with this. So the social science tells us that people who care for the planet are people who feel connected to it. That the connection is part of identity, who they think they are, how they feel, how they want to react. They do things that reflect that identity. And the stronger their conservation identity is, people have lots of identities. One of them is a conservation identity. The stronger that conservation identity is, the greater the work they will do to protect the planet. My conservation identity is far bigger in me than it was when I was a 17-year-old, but it was there when I was a 17-year-old, and it's grown over time, and so it has the work that I do. Museums are an important part about building and nurturing this conservation identity. So the identity can be almost frivolent, as in, I really like coffee or wine, and I'm concerned about whether the climate affects whether or not those beans or grapes grow. And so that's what matters to me about climate. It can be more complex. It can be like the politics in the United States. It can be something where you take action, you're really interested, like the image on the left. This is my son about 5 years ago, helping to participate in documenting the regrowth of an area, returning to nature over time. And it can be as powerful and upsetting and angry as on the right-hand side, thinking about the injustice between folks who are doing things to hurt the planet and folks who have less power and are not doing, and are being affected by that and unable to create change. So your identity is different for everyone around climate. But we know that experiences in nature paired with a caring adult who models behavior of caring for nature are indicators of the likelihood that a person will grow up to take climate action. My father taking me fishing is the basis for probably most of my climate work. I'm not a fisher person, and I didn't have to fish, which was the joy of being in nature. I could go play and do everything else, but I was with my dad while we were fishing, while he was fishing and we were in nature. And so that connection is a real predictor of someone's likelihood to be involved in climate action. And you can experience that in a museum, whether your museum, like this children's museum in Massachusetts, is set literally in nature, or you're in the center of a city and you are recreating nature so that children can engage with it. It can be indoors, not just outdoors, where you're using natural materials and views to the outside, and you're talking about age-appropriate activities that connect someone to nature. And it can reach teenagers or middle schoolers who have an opportunity to interact with living things and to do the science and to care for things and to learn about them and feel connected to them. Or it can be museum exhibits where people of all ages have discussions, acquire information, and think about what they need to know about the planet and what they could do to take action. Which is what leads us to the next section, is agency. So the social science says that the action a person takes is dependent upon feelings or perceptions of agency. I'm going to give you a good definition of it, but here's some more information. So agency is the feeling of having the ability to create some sort of change, to make some sort of difference. If you don't believe you can make a difference, that's when you give up. That's when grief or despair take over. But that agency comes a mix of all those things you discover about yourself and the world when you're at a museum. It's emotions, it's knowledge, it's hopes, and it's fears. And it shows up in a person most often when their values and identity don't align with what they see going on around them. And they feel like they need to put those two into alignment. And the only way they can do that is some aspects that they have control of, where they have agency. Spoiler alert, connectedness to others, like coming to this session today, is a big boost to feelings of agency and mental health, mental well-being. So extra points for coming today. I'm glad that you're all here. So what is agency? We group them into three kinds of: individual, what can I do now today? What do I have control over? Collective, what do we do as a group when we all get together and solve a problem? And proxy agency, where on behalf of others, you influence some work to get done. So some quick examples are, if you're a museum conservator and you're about to clean a painting, you have choices about the materials you use to care for that painting. Those materials have differing impacts on the climate by how they were made, how they got to you, how you use them, how you dispose them. And if you look at the greenhouse gas impacts of the things you use to clean a painting, if you use 5 pairs of nitrile gloves in that process, your biggest impact is the gloves. So what can you choose to do? Be careful with your handling and use 1 pair of gloves, and you can immediately decrease your impact. So that's individual agency, where you can make a choice. Collective agency is where a bunch of people get together. And in the United States, in the Chesapeake Bay, pollution that flows into the bay contributes to practically the death of the bay. And so communities adopt storm drains so that when the rain falls and all of the trash on the road goes into the stormwater sewer and out into the bay, they have a way of telling people to clean up that storm sewer, to keep the garbage off the streets, to not dump things down it, and to care for the bay. So this, by collective action, they are caring for the storm sewers in their community and educating people about safe behavior for protecting the bay. And then proxy agency is an example of this. This is on Oahu, so one of the islands in the Hawaiian chain, where we worked to restore a fish pond. This is an 800-year-old sustainable fish farming practice that went out of use in the 1950s. And by collective action of everyone worked together, we restored a working fish pond on behalf of the entire community. All of these volunteers will go away back on their vacations or back home or something, and they won't ever eat the fish that come out of this fish pond, but the community will. So that's proxy agency for a sustainable approach to life on behalf of people in the community. So remember that agency is when you feel like you have the ability to influence the situation. And that moment where you start to take action leads to hope. But hope is the thing that we have less information on, less study of. So there's only a couple slides on that. But the summary is, excuse me, that collective action has a positive psychological effect on environmental actors. You could call them activists, you can call them regular folks who are picking up the trash, but environmental actors. They often feel uplifted by that experience and empowered to do more. And I can tell you this absolutely from my own experience, and I suspect it's yours as well. That connectedness to others who feel that same way, build that agency, do that uplifting. They restore you to get up and go do this work again. And that hope associated with that agency and expansive thinking, like this can be done, it comes from action. So there's really a loop. We go back to the section before and we get into action, which then leads to hope. And that hopeful activity drives us to take action and we go back around. So just like the climate, it's a system that has feedback loops. So there's growing evidence that participating in that collective action stimulates psychological transformation that is long lasting, which we need looking at the future of climate change. So in summary, climate grief and anxiety are a manifestation of awareness of climate change. And they get that awareness out in the world and in our museums. And people need that awareness and the learning they get from us to begin building their skills and fostering action. The positive messages we send them, not the doom and gloom. You have to give them some facts, but the positive message we leave them with empowers them to do more of the same. Talk about it, learn about it, take action. And the collective action, it is what is going to help their mental health and help the planet at the same time. So how are we going to do this in our museums? Seriously, it's only one slide. I'm not going to go on forever about that, but I'm going to plant the seeds that we can build climate awareness in experiential, positive, supportive ways at all different scales, at all different costs. We can acknowledge that there is grief and joy in caring for the planet and that both are important because they spur us to take action. We can normalize discussion about mental health and well-being, whether it's on climate or any other issue of mental well-being, because it's about the wellness of our communities. and we can advocate and demonstrate time in nature, whether it's in a room in a greenhouse with flowers growing, with vegetables growing, or it's actually getting out in nature and getting dirty. All scales of connection to nature really, really matter. And then we can create opportunities for collective action. But don't forget to think about yourself. This slide is an image about how I feel in my workday, and my team members do. So this pink slide here that says, yay, the IRA passed, is a very American statement that the Inflation Reduction Act, which is supporting so much climate action in the United States through energy efficiency and clean energy and sequestration, that act has passed, and maybe we'll have funding to do more good work. So that makes me feel great. I often worry, am I doing enough? Sometimes I feel this way as well. I try and push that aside. And I focus that even though I feel scared and stressed, most of the time, I love what I do. And when I get in a room with other people who are doing that work, it makes this green part be the most of my day. So thank you very much for the work you do, for the things you're thinking about, and for having me.
Thank you so much for your, sharing your expertise and for such an enlightening presentation. And I think that, the three most important topics you talked about, identity, agency, and hope. And I feel that museums and other cultural organizations can use that as a framework to build climate awareness and advocate for nature. And I feel connected to, you shared your example about your dad, and you went fishing, and having that role model in your life. I think that's really important for young ones today. So thank you very much for your presentation. And next, I'd like to, last but not the least, I'm very honored to welcome our final notable guest speaker from one of the world's most innovative museums, Mr. Majed Jakka Mansoori, Deputy Executive Director of Museum of the Future. The Museum of the Future, which was envisioned by His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, Vice President and Prime Minister of the UAE and ruler of Dubai. Mr. Majed believes in the vision that foresees people 200 years from now, looking back at the Museum of the Future, still in awe of its timeless formation and its ever-changing narrative, with immense passion for creating ultimate experiences. He sees Museum of the Future as the ideal fit. Championing this unique vision from design to execution is a huge part of his role at the Museum of the Future. Mr. Majed, the mic is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's quite, a good segue, I think, as Ms. Sutton mentioned. Just let me make sure my screen is sharing properly. Okay, so if you can confirm it's all working. Amazing. Thank you so much again, and thank you to Ms. Sutton and Dr. Shirley-Ann for their talks. I think it's quite an amazing segue to move from talking from the macro level and going down to the micro level as a single institution as the Museum of the Future. And as both of you were talking, I was taking quite some notes and probably changing a lot of my talking points based on some of the points. And I think most points kind of complement what we really try to do here at the museum. It's worth starting by talking about what the Museum of the Future is and how the Museum of the Future really came to life 10 years ago. And that story really started with a gathering that we have here in Dubai called the World Government Summit, where we invite an invite-only kind of event where 3,000 world leaders and business leaders and climate activists from all around the world would come here in Dubai to convene to discuss the future of governments and discuss what is the challenges that will face these governments in the future. And one way that His Highness wanted us to really explore that is to look kind of at different aspects of how we can showcase the future. And the idea with that is to really get people to experience that future so that they take action on building the future that they basically see. So from that, we created a white box. It was a temporary kind of exhibition. It was fully immersive, and it was a fraction of the size that we see now in this picture. But at that time, we really focused on specific topics that were relevant to the world. Whether it's the future of food, the future of AI. We had an exhibition called Humanities 2.0, which is really talking about how technology could foster us kind of in certain challenges that we're facing now or that we'll face in the future with climate change and elements like that. And all of that was kind of a learning of what the Museum of the Future could be. And I think based on that, that kind of translated into a Museum of the Future, or permanent Museum of the Future, where His Highness wanted people to explore what the future is on a much larger scale. It was quite successful in these temporary ones that we wanted to explore a future that is inclusive, a future that is open. And I think one of the statements that Ms. Sutton made, which is kind of build the climate awareness in experiential, positive, and supportive ways. And I think that's exactly what we're trying to do. But maybe climate is one aspect of it, but in general, it's really about creating awareness in a positive and a supportive way. We, of course, are not kind of shying away from the challenges that we'll face. And I think that is an important aspect of any kind of the experiences that we do. How can we kind of showcase the challenges, but at the same time focus on the solutions that we're going to develop and focus on the solutions that we really need to harness in order to create a positive and hopeful future for all. And then the second item was I think the stigma, and I think there was a stigma in this region, or a challenge that we're facing in this region, which is kind of the museum-going culture. And Dr. Shirley-Ann kind of mentioned that on a high level. So how can we make the the museum a place where people from a diverse people, so the 200 plus nationalities that are living in the United Arab Emirates and Dubai can would want to visit a museum. So of course, we needed to make something that's exciting. We needed to make something that's inclusive, and we needed to look at ways in order to get people to feel that whatever they're seeing at the Museum of the Future is something that is a world that they'd like to be part of. And I think that's kind of translated with the statement that you see below. And it's really a place where we're looking to get great minds to meet, design, and shape the future. So it's not just about seeing the future. It's really about bringing like-minded people to be part of designing and be part of shaping the future, the inclusive future, and the hopeful future, and the positive future that we'd like to build. The museum has been open now for a little over 16 months, and we've been sold out every single day since we opened. And the exciting thing about this is that it's not just people that are coming, from abroad. It's actually people that are living in the city, and I think we have a good mix of 50% between kind of residents of Dubai and the UAE, and 50% of people that are visiting from abroad that would like to experience the museum. And I think that kind of ticked the box of people, of people actually wanting to be at the Museum in the Future and wanting to really see the future that they'll be part of. Now, talking about kind of sustainability and what the museum is really focused on, and I think one of the major design briefs that we looked at, or the goals that we wanted to achieve, is to, besides the look of the museum as kind of being futuristic and different in its kind of design sense, but also how can we embed sustainability in what we do, whether it's from the building or whether it's from the experiences that we do. I'm very happy to say that the museum is the only museum in the Middle East that's actually received the LEED Platinum status, which is kind of the highest rating a building can get when it comes to the kind of green building aspects. And that is done through many aspects, whether it's the solar farm that is kind of directly connected to the museum, that's supplying 30% of the of the energy needs of the museum, or it's kind of looking at the materialities in terms of building the material and how, in terms of building materials and engineering aspects that allow us to build a marvelous, beautiful building, but at the same time ensure that we're being sustainable in our choices of design materials and elements like that. And I think, the facade, and obviously I'll just talk a little bit about the facade. The materials that we use in the facade is quite unique in its sense. So instead of kind of using, concrete or aluminum or steel to the factory, although the outside kind of shell looks like it's steel, but it's actually glass reinforced fiber plastic, something that is actually made in a sustainable way, but at the same time it's also much stronger and much more durable than usual facade items or usual facade material that we see. So really the engineering that went into that was quite kind of complex in its sense, because the brief from ourselves and from leadership was, let's make sure that this is a building of the future and its sustainability as well. One of the striking aspects of the museum we see is kind of the green mound. So this green mound is all the water or all the kind of nutrients that we see are using. So we don't basically use fresh water. We're actually using recycled water all over. It's designed in a way where we don't need to have kind of vertical, droppings of the water. Instead, it's all through gravity. Basically, it moves from up to bottom. And it was kind of amazing when we completed the green mound, how instantly it's become kind of an ecosystem. For so we have a local bee population. Migrating birds would come and actually call the museum home, and it's and we've worked so hard to make sure that we're actually preserving these ecosystems rather than and ensuring that there's more kind of species that would call the green mound as their home. So I'm happy to also share some of the honey that we're also cultivating from the local bee population that we have at the museum. The challenge that we had, of course, and this is kind of moving from the outside to the inside, is of course we have a striking, beautiful building, but how can we make the experience something that is equally, if not more, exciting? And it all started with one vision that we work towards it, and it's really moving what we call kind of moving from outer space to inner space. And what do I mean by that? It's really talking about the elements of the future. So by outer space, we're actually talking literally about outer space, about why space is an important aspect in the future. The UAE has invested heavily over the last decade into having a space program. So why is that relevant? And I think we wanted to answer that question. And we did that by really focusing on showcasing how space could help us have a more sustainable life in Earth. And one of the kind of prototypes that we're showing there is a energy collecting system from space that basically harnesses solar energy and beams it to Earth. Now, of course, this might sound quite, maybe too futuristic that it's impossible, but we actually rooted all of the elements that we're showing in science. So everything was kind of rooted into research, where we had a team of researchers, both local and international, work together into developing these prototypes. And then these prototypes were really taken by designers and developed into a whole world where people are experiencing it. And we wanted people to experience the future more with all of their senses. So it's not just about kind of seeing something, but it's about hearing and touching and really be fully immersed into that future. So it starts with outer space, and then the second chapter is what we call the it's an institute that is focused on kind of resolving challenges with climate change and challenges with biotechnology through kind of genetic engineering and elements like that. So it's really about how can we use current technologies that are available now in helping us navigate the challenges that we face with climate change moving forward. So, for example, you know, what we're seeing right now with regards to the extreme temperatures or the extreme heat that we're seeing all around the world, one of the elements that we were looking at is how do you genetically engineer certain crops or certain elements that they can withstand these heats and be able to perform. And then finally, the last chapter is what we call al-waha. And al-waha means oasis in Arabic, and it really focuses on the human aspects in the future. Everything that we're hearing about the future, you know, talks about all the challenges that we'll face, such as, you know, artificial intelligence and how artificial intelligence is going to take all our jobs, and robotics, and, you know, all of these challenges that might face. Our vision for the future is that the center, no matter the development of technologies, the center of the future are human beings. You know, by the year 2030, the #1 kind of epidemic is projected to be depression, and of course, depression and anxiety are elements that are kind of as a result of partially technological advancements that we have. People losing human connectivity with each other, and this is something that we are kind of focusing on harnessing further. That no matter the development of technologies in the future, the most important aspect of it is human beings, their mental well-being, their overall well-being, and their connectivity with each other. And that is the foundation of any civilization in the future. Of course, we do have a space that is focused on, especially designed for children, called Future Heroes, and it's really about harnessing all the different elements and teaching the children different skills of the future, but focusing as well on the challenges that they might face or the challenges that Earth might face. We want, you know, the children to leave the museum, you know, feeling excited about, you know, taking action into doing that, and I think that relates part to the kind of agency or the proxy even aspect that Ms. Sutton spoke in her presentation. So that is an intriguing part and an important part that we'd like to focus on. And finally, we don't, you know, we wouldn't forget the well-being of our own employees. And I think that is something that we've truly focused on this video. But of course, the question is how do you do that, especially since we're a very kind of international city. So in the museum team, we have over 45 nationalities of people working in different aspects of different departments. And I think what we've done quite early on is really ensure that we have the current policies and systems that ensures that we are taking care of the employee or the human first, and focusing on the human first versus kind of getting you know, the maximum that we can out of each and every employee. So we have specific programs that we've developed, you know, whether it's in kind of fitness elements or whether it's in kind of mental well-being as well programs, or ensuring that we, you know, it's about ensuring that we take care of each and every person, each and every employee that is part of the Museum of the Future family. Thank you so much for your time. I'm looking forward to any questions from the team. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Majed, for sharing your really bringing this as a case study about what's happening at the Museum of the Future. And congratulations on receiving the LEED Platinum status at the museum. That's wonderful to hear. It's really evident from your presentation that a lot of thought has been put into creating those spaces. You talked about the mound, Al-Waha, future heroes, and you talked about well-being. It's really evident that all of these elements regarding sustainability, building awareness, thinking about the future, all of this has been put into the museum space, and also the architecture. It's just such a fantastic museum to look at. And it's such a prime example, Museum of the Future, of what museums are all about, and especially when we talked on earlier about museums as agents of change. So thank you very much for your presentation. Now I'd like to move forward and ask our respected guest speakers for any final comments before we conclude the conference.
Can I go first?
Yep.
Sure. So I really want to comment again, as Sarah mentioned, on the flow of this conversation. It really just magnifies the point I was trying to bring across, where we see museums as changing their focus as just presenting the past, but thinking about how do we showcase the future? How do we create communities of actors, of people who one are as was said, are have safe well-beings, or have safe spaces to explore, to communicate, to discuss, to understand the challenges, but also learn about ways in which to act and to be change makers, and to also think about this rapidly changing space of technological advancement. I mean, oh my God, we blink and then something new has popped up, and it's just, change is just the pace at which this change is happening is just astounding. And yes, we could get lost in it. We could forget the human element. And I'm so encouraged to hear that, this is something that is being brought to the forefront, that we're not forgetting that at the end of the day, our civilization can't persist if we don't think about taking care of the people that we have today and the people that come tomorrow as well. So thinking about how we engage with communities, to think about health, about well-being, to think about themselves, but also the communities, to think about the broader planetary issues that we encounter, and creating opportunities to build a better world, so to speak. So I'm really excited at the great work that everyone is operating. And Sarah, your presentation on the challenges with that sort of cognitive dissonance that we face, where we know that there are challenges, we know that we need to do something, but it just feels like such a big problem that we don't have that agency, and we don't have the ability to create change. I mean, I can't tell you how many people I've come across who said, yeah, I know it's wrong, but what can I do? I'm a single person and I can't change the problem. And that perhaps is the state that we need to start to tweak, and we need to start to think about. Well, we are, as agents of change collectively, we can create those bigger, grand changes that we want to see. And so, starting to think of museums as that space where we can have those collective actions, where we could see even our individual actions being amplified across groups and across communities, I think is a really, really great way to create that broader agency.
Thank you for that note. Any other additional comments before we conclude?
I'm just hoping that the Museum of the Future is on the ICOM 2025 meeting planning list that we'll be able to see it if we're able to come to the international conference. I look forward to that. And yes, congratulations on platinum. It is a superhuman achievement to reach and maintain that. So congratulations, and what a great example.
Thank you very much. Definitely, I think we're already in contact with the ICOM 2025 team, so the museum will definitely be part of that journey. And even if it is not, we'll make sure that any of you are most welcome to visit the museum at any time. We'd love to share and discuss how we can work together on different elements. So thank you so much. I think I think I've learned more today than I think I've provided. So thank you for both your energy, and thank you for both your your advocation for what you do. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And I'll be mindful of your time zones. I know that everyone is from different time zones today, so really appreciate that. And it's time to conclude session 2 of our conference. On behalf of ICOM Pakistan, thank you to our esteemed speakers, Dr. Shirley-Ann Behravesh, Ms. Sarah Sutton, and Mr. Majed Jakka Mansoori. We are truly grateful for the time you dedicated to sharing your knowledge with our audience. Your insights and expertise have added immense value to our conference. And thank you as well to our audience that have joined us today on YouTube Live. With this note, I conclude this conference. Thank you, everyone, and goodbye.